Welcome, deep divers. Today we're taking a really quite personal and surprisingly profound look at a piece. It's titled The Three Queens of Katwe by Gospel Lakia. And this isn't actually about the famous chess scene in Katwe that many people know. It's really about navigating life's, fundamental struggles with something much deeper than just strategy. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack Lakia's own intense personal struggle. He grapples with what seem like simple commandments, right? And we want to explore the kind of revelatory insights that ultimately transformed his whole understanding. It's a really fascinating look at how deeply held beliefs can, truly challenge us, and how a personal journey, sometimes a difficult one, can lead to maybe an unexpected breakthrough.
It's really compelling, isn't it, how Lakia uses this powerful imagery of queens,
Right.
like on a chessboard.
Mm.
But he uses them to represent these concepts that are both foundational pillars of his faith, but also incredibly demanding. So we'll trace the author's path from like a childhood grasp of these ideas to this really profound adult revelation about what it actually means to live out one's deepest convictions.
Right, building on that queen imagery, these
Yeah.
foundational principles. The author then reveals what they actually are. Lakia introduces these three queens, not as literal women, but as three profound commandments, all centered on love. And just like those chess pieces, they're described as powerful, definitely unpredictable, and just impossible to ignore. An absolute requirement, really, in the author's view, for the Christian journey.
And the setting, Katwe, is used so effectively, isn't it, to kind of frame this internal struggle. Lakia presents Katwe as this place of fighters, where survival, it demands wit and grit and real heart. But for him, the battles weren't physical ones, not fists or chess pieces. They were with these three commandments that had sort of taken up residence deep in his heart.
Okay, so let's nail them down. What exactly are these three queens, these commandments that became such a battleground for him? Well, the first is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might. Pretty central. The second, which he says is like the first, love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's from Matthew 22. Many will know it. And then the third, husband, love your wife as Christ loves the church and gave himself for it, which is from Ephesians 5.
And it's interesting how he talks about his childhood understanding. He says, as a kid, he sort of believed he could master these pretty easily, mostly just by memorizing them. He wasn't, particularly bothered by the weight of them back then.
Yeah.
Which it raises a really important question for us, doesn't it? Is just knowing a commandment, maybe even reciting it, the same as actually truly living it.
Yeah, exactly. And this next part, this is where the journey gets really pivotal, I think. As Lakia got older, that second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, it just morphed from a simple idea into this huge internal struggle. He remembers, as a child fighting with friends but making up quickly, that was easy. But later on,
Yeah.
even just occasional clashes felt, almost impossible to genuinely reconcile in his heart.
He has this really strong language. He describes being sick with the love your neighbor thing, and even worse, the is yourself part. Just a deep, deep struggle. He'd perform the outward acts, smiling, being courteous, helping out. But he knew, deep down, his heart wasn't in it. Not really. He wrestled with resentment, anger, even malice, and just questioned how God could even give such a demanding commandment. How is it possible?
And the struggle was so consuming, so profound, that the author actually believed this was the only commandment he couldn't keep. He felt he was doing okay with the others, basically. And this deep personal crisis, it leads him eventually to have this really pivotal conversation with his pastor. It happened right after a Sunday service that was, ironically, all about love. You can almost picture it, right? The author, who's called Bob in the text, he just bluntly goes up to the pastor and says, basically, I don't seem to understand the passage that says love your neighbor as yourself. He makes it clear it's not that he doesn't know it. He knows the words. He just fundamentally struggles to do it, to keep it.
And the pastor's explanation, within the context of Lakia's story anyway, is absolutely critical here. It's a very specific theological take. He explains that, from his perspective, this command to love, this profound love, isn't really for non-Christians. He argues that unbelievers, or sinners, as he puts it, they just don't possess the inherent power to love like that. So for the pastor, Bob's struggle actually becomes evidence. Fascinating, right? Evidence that he is born again. Because, and this is a direct quote the pastor uses, sinners don't struggle to keep the commandment of God. He does not simply keep it and can't. Quote, for a sinner, there is no struggle. He swims in sin, he enjoys sinning. Quite a stark view.
Wow, yeah. That is a very strong, almost confrontational statement from the pastor in Lycia's telling. And then the pastor brings up Apostle Paul, saying, I beat my body and put it under subjection. Oh, more, implying this sort of forcing of the body against its natural will. But, brah, Bob, he pushes back, doesn't he? He says, I don't think it's the same thing. I can say I don't have the power to love. I only want to love because I'm aware and familiar with the passage.
So what's the deeper issue he's pointing to there? It seems like more than just, a struggle of the flesh.
Exactly, bro. Bob's distinction there is really powerful because it perfectly sets up the pastor's ultimate point, which is that it's a case of fundamental inability, right, at a core level, not just a lack of willpower or discipline. And the pastor uses these two really compelling analogies to try and explain this difference. It's quite profound. First, he talks about Lazarus. Lazarus heard Jesus call his name, sure, under authority, but it was only, this is the key, until the next phrase followed, forth, he was able to leave the tomb. So the action wasn't just hearing. It required that next command, that enabling power. And the second analogy is Nicodemus, the religious leader. He was pricked by Christ's words and signs, so he got it intellectually. He was curious, willing to engage. But crucially, he was not yet born again. And Jesus tells him directly, you must be born again.
Okay, so pulling those threads together, Lazarus needing to come forth, Nicodemus needing to be born again. What's the pastor's final message? What does it really mean for Bod and for the author experiencing this? He basically delivers the final blow, the checkmate statement, as the author calls it. You must be born again. There is an experience you can't have until you cross that thin line, and that difference is huge.
Exactly right. And for the author listening to this, it wasn't just like a metaphor or a nice phrase. It implied that this born-again experience wasn't simply adopting a label or even just a gradual spiritual improvement. No, it was understood as a fundamental internal spiritual transformation that actually grants the power, the ability to fulfill these commands. A power completely distinct from just human effort or intellectual agreement. It's like a total shift in your core being, giving you a new spiritual capability you didn't have before.
And the immediate aftermath, wow. The author describes it so powerfully. Lycia talks about just hanging his head, tears welling up, feeling like a scale peel off my eyes, and suddenly I could see just this profound moment where he couldn't argue anymore. Despite all the outward morality, the church involvement, the zeal, he realized that in this crucial spiritual sense the pastor described, he was still a sinner. He hadn't crossed that line.
Yeah, and the journey home sounds incredibly intense, deeply emotional. He says the tears just wouldn't stop. He could barely get home. He describes feeling like a hole bored through my heart, and his heart was bleeding like the nails pierced into Christ's palms. Just raw imagery. It clearly wasn't some fleeting feeling, flash of lightning that's gone in an instant. It was this deep, painful, but ultimately maybe liberating moment of self-recognition.
And Lycia wraps up this whole section with this incredibly impactful line. It sums up the entire paradigm shift. He says, all these years I was alive in morality, now I was crucified. It really drives home that idea of a death, doesn't it? A death to that old way of being, just living by rules, for a completely new, transformed kind of existence. What a journey, really. From a kid just memorizing words to an adult grappling with this intense internal conflict, and then finally to this huge realization about where the power to actually love comes from, the source of it all.
It really does highlight a critical distinction, doesn't it? The author's story. It's a gap between, say, intellectual understanding or even performing outwardly moral actions, and that profound internal shift that actually grants the power, the real ability, to live according to your deepest beliefs. Is the difference between knowing what you should do and actually possessing the inner capability to do it.
Yeah. This whole deep dive into Lycia's experience, it kind of reveals that sometimes. Well, the answers to our biggest struggles, they aren't always found in just gritting our teeth and trying harder, are they? Sometimes it's about understanding where our true capability, our actual power to act, really originates from.
So maybe a thought for you listening. Where in your own life might you feel like you're alive in morality? Doing the right things, thinking the right thoughts. But perhaps missing that internal power to come forth, as the story puts it. What thin line, maybe, is waiting for you to cross to unlock some new level of understanding or capability in an area where you felt stuck? Something to think about.